Alright, welcome to Yogami.
Hey, so I'm Tushar. I go by Kyogami at most places, so you can find me on GitHub and LinkedIn by Kyogami, even Instagram by Kyogami. I'm from Meerut. I won't take too much with the introduction. I have a purpose in mind here. I'm from Meerut, and with recently we have this IRDS running, so I've been able to go to Delhi a lot now. So that means that I've been able to explore this place, I've been able to check out these new bars and new experiences here. And the first thing that you run into is the Delhi Metro, right? Because you want some sort of thing to get you from one place to the other. You want to get from one place to the other, and the Delhi Metro is the nicest way to do that. But because it's a really big network, there are 269 stops, there are 12 lines, I can't really remember all of that. So I use this application, they have this official trip planner, where you can just tell, okay, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to get to, and it will give you these options, okay, these are the ways you can get to your location. And as I'm using this application, I'm sort of developing some forms with it, because it's a government website, so I have a lot of issues with it. First of all, the UI is trash. I can't really do much about it. This is what you expect from it. Then there is no fuzzy search. That's, I think, modern things that you would expect from it. I can't really spell Chhatarpur. This is the wrong spelling, by the way, so you can take a guess. Then they do show you a map, which is very funky. You can slide on it. It does some really wonky stuff. You cannot pinch zoom.
Also, they randomly change the name of the station.
Yeah, they just randomly change the name of the station. They do really weird stuff. Then you don't have offline support, which means that if you're inside a tunnel, you can't really change your plans. Okay, you get a call from someone saying, okay, we want to get to that place now, and you're like, oh shit, I need to figure out what to do. Then obviously there's no dark theme, we want that. And just a nitpick, they tell you, okay, it's going to take 80 minutes, just tell me it's going to take 1 hour 20 minutes. Right, you know, it's a bit
It's like when you ask the age of the baby and they say 18 months old.
Yeah, it's an 18-month-old baby, just give me the proper number. And while we're at it, there are a lot of features that I would prefer for it to have. For example, I want to have some location-to-location journey planning, where I can say, okay, I'm at Nexus Salon right now, I want to get to this restaurant called Little Korea. And it can figure out, okay, which particular station should I get to, because there are multiple stations near us, right? And there are going to be a multiple station near the end location. I wanted to figure out, okay, which station should I get to, and then give me the plan, right? Then I want a crowd indicator. Although for Delhi Metro, there's just, yeah, it's crowded, very crowded. Then I want some multi-pointer. For example, let's say I want to go to the Little Korea restaurant, but before that I want to go to Nehru Place to buy some really nice stuff for myself. So I want to sell my RAM, right? I have a lot of that. So I cannot say, okay, these are the 3 locations I want to get to, and it won't give me a journey for that. Then I would prefer, as a new guy in Delhi, I want some special advices. For example, there are 2 blue lines, which was very confusing. I've reached very interesting places because of that. On the pink line, it's very hard to figure, okay, I need to go this way, or I need to go that way, or which side the door open, because it's so crowded, you have to figure out, okay, should I move this way, should I move that way? So there are a lot of missing features that I would like to have. But there are a lot of problems with that. First of all, it's a government website. You cannot ask them for clean air. How would you ask them for a clean website, right? So that's so how would you go about doing that? And if you decide that you want to build it yourself, there is a lot of complex groundwork that you need to do. You need to figure out all the where do you get the data for the Delhi Metro, what kind of algorithm do you use for route planning, how do you maintain all of that, and then you will get to, okay, what should be a good user experience for my app, right? And then someone will show up and say, okay, I want a terminal UI for that, so now you have another thing to work on, right? So at least for me, that's going to be a lot. I prefer to use CLIs, then websites, and then TUIs, and I would prefer all of those to exist, and I myself cannot build those. So I may not have a brain, but I do have an idea. I created a plan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a tree that is going to solve all of these basic problems that all of us will run into. And then I will use the power of our community here, everyone here, to provide this plate to everyone for free of use, a partial license, your typical license, and you guys can build solutions based on that. And of course, because I want this to be very highly usable, I want it to run everywhere, I need to make sure that it is cross-platform compatible, even including the web, right? So that means that we need version 32, which is usually a headache if you've ever built a web application entirely in Rust. This is what we were doing in my previous company, Viral. We had our entire web application, our backend, everything in Rust. So that meant that we have to be very mindful of what libraries we use, because not all of those support no standard or version 32. Yes. So because this is a hobby project, I get to over-engineer the fuck out of it. I I decided I'm gonna create some codes, and that is going to be my proof of concept. The first thing I decided was I want to pre-compute the entire network, because there are only as many stops and there are as many lines, and they won't really change a lot. Like if they are going to change, if they're adding a new stop, this will be a big news. So we'll have, they won't really change a lot. So we can pre-compute the entire thing. Then once we've pre-computed the entire network, we've figured out how to get from one place to another for the entire network. I want to embed all of that information right into the binary itself. So whenever a person uses this state, I want to make sure that it is all included in the .data section of your else or whatever. Right, so this enables you to do, first of all, offline support. You don't have to do any sort of online queries, or you don't really need to do any requests. Then let's say you were trying to implement that interesting feature of location to location journey planning. What you will have to do, let's say we have this geolocation here and we have the geolocation for the destination. You can use some sort of a nearest neighbor algorithm to figure out, okay, these are the nearest metro stations. Let's say you decided, okay, I want to take three on both sides. Then that means you have to plan journeys for 9 things, right? So 9 pairs possible. So that's a lot of computation. So if all of this is embedded right into your application, then you kind of get rid of all the cost that comes with it, right? And that also means that, say, if you were running this inside a serverless function, you won't really have to pay for the compute, because you are not doing any compute. You are just looking into a B-tree map and then just returning whatever you have. Then of course you want compatibility with version 32. And then finally, once all of that is done, I want to have the necessities, the bells and whistles for the search and human touch. Now, the first thing we have is we have to pre-compute, and before we can pre-compute, we have to decide, okay, what kind of algorithm we want to use. The first thing that comes to mind is the Regex. It gives you the shortest path, but it doesn't really work out this way for a public transit system like this, because it's very time dependent. There are some variants that do this. For example, there is TD, which is time Regex. There is LD, which is late Regex, which gives you transfers and minimum time and all that stuff. But I decided, no, I want to go with something that is purpose-built for this particular use case. So Microsoft came up with an algorithm called Raptor. It's a really bullshit of a name in my opinion, because they took the A from based. I don't think that makes any sense. Anyways, so what it does is it's a completely different model from say Regex, which tries to find your shortest path. What this does is it runs in rounds. It tries to optimize in rounds. You tell it, okay, this is the max number of transfers I want. By the way, transfer is line switching from one line to another, right? So you can say, I want to have this many transfers, and it will figure out all of the particular options that you have available for you. Now, this is not a DSA talk, so I won't be getting into this. But I have implemented all of this, and I have published this as a crate called Raptor. So if you want to use it, you can directly use it. This also works with GTFS. GTFS is the format for public transit information. That's what DMRC allows you to provides actually. There are a lot of reasons. I can get really into it. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna keep it very minimal. So, first of all, it figures out your optimal journeys. Basically, it says, okay, you can either get there on a single train at in 1 hour, or you can decide, okay, I want to do one transfer, I'm allowed to do one transfer. I will get there in 50 minutes, and it will give you all of these solutions. Then it can be extended for multiple criteria. So, for example, you can say I want minimum transfer and I also want minimum crowd. Right, so it can do that by default. The basic version, that's what it does. It can run on multiple cores, that's nice. And also you can integrate multiple networks. So for example, we are doing this for DMRC, but you can also connect NMRC and even connect Rapido in between. You can say, okay, whenever you're doing, you want to connect this network with this network, you can use Rapido. It will do this by default. You don't have to do much, so long as you have the API for Rapido, which I doubt. Then there is obviously real time, and it works with GPFS. That's good. So again, we'll really speed run through this. So now we just decide on what our data structure is going to be. This is what we are going to embed into our application. The first, and because we are going to embed this in our application, we have to be very mindful of what kind of data we are actually storing, because that will really tank your binary size. Right? So that means if you're serving this over the web, you will have a lot of bytes to send over. Right? That's not nice. So first of all, we just decide, okay, we are not going to use the string name for the stops for the routes. We're just going to use numbers, which is nice because it gives us two things primarily. First of all, it gives you the order implementation, which is a trait which allows you to do binary searches over your data structures. Then it also implements copy. That means it's very easy to create multiple copies of your data, which is useful for Raptor because it does a lot of copying. Next up, we are going to decide on what a single journey looks like. Again, this is not a DSA thing, so I won't really get a lot into it. The most interesting part is how the plan is, instead of being a vector of your stops, okay, go from this stop to this stop to this stop, I have basically said, on this route, go till this stop. This allows me to only keep, okay, what kind of transfers do I need to have. That means our first stop is implicit because we are going to start where we are standing, so that's implicit. Then all of our transfers are also implicit because this is just an ordered vector. So that's nice. Also, again, we have to keep the arrival time for sorting and all that. Finally, we just put all of these together in a bland B-tree map. This goes from is this readable? Okay, nice. So our plans for the entire network is going to be a B-tree map from your source stop to your destination stop, and all of your journeys possible for that thing. And then you have to keep some auxiliary data that is going to be your lookup tables for, okay, what's the name for this stop, what's the name for this route, what's the color for this route, and all that kind of information. Now that we've decided what our data structure is going to be.
What is the aux table?
The auxiliary data is anything where you are maintained, right? So say we are only keeping this numbers for your stop ID, right? So how would you present that to the end user? You cannot say, okay, go to stop number 0. Like you want to tell them, okay, go to Pascal's or something like that. So that is where they will map our integers to the actual numbers. Right, and more information. Yes. So now that we have decided what our algorithm is going to be and what our data structure is going to be, what we can do is we can just load our DMRC data. This is coming from the Raptor crate, so don't worry about it too much, just take it as a given for now. I'll be releasing a blog post to explain this because it took me like 3-4 days just to parse out the research paper for this. So I'm gonna write it down so that people who are not very comfortable with mathematical research papers, they can understand this really nice algorithm in opinion. So our pre-computing stuff is very simple. It's just this many line of code, which is pretty good. This is, if you're not aware, if you're really new to this, these are your iterator combinators. This allows you to do iteration over whatever kind of values you have without using for loops. And these tend to be really fast because the compiler is really smart. It is able to compile this down to same instructions a lot of the time. So it's usually better to use iterator combinators than to use your for loops. So this is very simple. We just decide, okay, this is every possible pair. Just think, okay, this is You have one stop and everything else, and then we move to next stop and everything else. Right. So you get all your source and destination. You run the timetable.raptor, that is the algorithm that figures out what the journey should be, and you collect it all into a BT map because that's what we decided on. So we run this, and keep in mind this is going to run every time you build your application. So this is going to run on your machine. When we run this takes 25 minutes, which is not really good. Usually Rust does take a lot of compilation time, but this is not very good.
This is very less.
Yeah.
Even
Sure.
I was working on my project. It was cybersecurity. It was like every compilation was around 90 to 120 minutes.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
It's very less.
Right. So the solution here is quite simple. So the iterator is obviously doing this on a single thread. So we just span out this work to multiple threads. Right. So how do I do that? First of all, we can use OS threads, but we cannot use Tokio for whatever reason. So this is a wake-up call. Why can't we use Tokio for this? Any takers?
Are you doing something else for async?
No. Okay. So this is going to be an exercise for the list.
The most complex things are always done for the research.
Yes, that's what the research paper did, by the way. The research paper for Raptor, it basically only gives you a description of finding the minimum arrival time, but it doesn't tell you how to calculate the journeys, and it just says, okay, do it on your own. So that was another bit of exercise from ourselves. Anyways, so when we do decide to use threads, it gets a bit complicated. First of all, I have to wrap my GTFS timetable in an arc because we want to share it across threads. Then I have to wrap my BT map in an arc mutex, which is bad because logs tend to lead to a lot of contention, right? So in this particular use case, they are going to contend for that particular log. Every thread is going to say, okay, give me the log so that I can write my result to it. Then you have to thread your spawn your thread, then you do your compute, you get the log, you push the join handle, you do all of that. So first of all, there is an objective issue with this, which is you have to fight for the log. The other thing is it's a different mental model. The iterators are really nice. That's what you start off with. So going to multi-threaded application, it feels a bit daunting. Finally, it's just very complicated. But we can make this a lot simpler. Let me introduce you to a crate called Rayon. Rayon is a CPU parallelization crate. What it does is it creates a work stealing thread pool. This is the exact same thing that Tokio does. But this is optimized for CPU workloads. And because our application is obviously CPU heavy, so we have to use this. Or we can use this, or obviously it's all up to you. And the cool part is they implement the same interface as an iterator combinator. So you just have to change your .iter to .pariter, and everything just becomes multi-threaded with magic. You don't have to do anything. And another cool part is they don't use logs internally, right? So that's pretty cool. Another thing that's really interesting about this is they use linked list internally. So that's a real world use case for this. Who uses linked list? Again, I would skip this part, but essentially what they do is each thread keeps its own result and then they collect at the end. So they are able to avoid the entire locking situation. So we changed one line of our code. Pretty good. Let's see where do we get, or do we need to optimize more? And on my machine, this goes to 3 minutes. From 25 minutes, we just changed a single line. And the thing is, we haven't even worked on our algorithm at all, right? So I did not have to go through and do an optimization pass on the algorithm, because right now it's just written for correctness and soundness that, okay, this is what the research paper says. So that's pretty cool. I think this is good enough for a proof of concept. So we're going to roll with this. Now, we have figured out how to pre-compute our entire network. I hope everyone is on board with this idea, right? Any questions so far? No? Okay, good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try and embed all of this information into our binary itself. By the way, how many people here knows the ELF data format, ELF format, like internally? There's data section, yes. Good. So in your ELF binaries that you generate on your Linux programs, they have this section called .data, in which all of your static variables get stored. So we have a static keyword, right? Whatever you put in those static variables, it gets stored in your .data section, and you get a reference to it essentially. And the cool part is, because it's part of your program, it always stays. That means the lifetime becomes very simple. It just becomes cache static. Now, Rust allows us to do some arbitrary computations during build time. For that, it provides us with a tool called build.rs, where you can just write your normal Rust code and it will do everything during build time. Usually, libraries use this for code generation. For example, you have a database schema and it generates your library for this. That's what the usual use case is. But what we can do is we can hijack this for computing all of our journeys. Then we have to write it down to the file system. That's where we sort of get into some icky situations, but let's just keep rolling with this. We have to serialize our data because obviously we need to write it down to a file, so we need to serialize it somehow. We'll figure out the serialization in a bit. Then we just write to a file. Then in our lib.rs, you can use this handy macro called include twice that will take the file contents and it will put those in your static variable journeys. Right. And again, this will always store in your .data section when you actually use this code. Now, for the actual usage, you have to deserialize it, which does not sit right with me because deserialization takes some time, right? They're gonna parse, they're gonna do some additional allocations. For example, if you're using certJSON, they do some optimization, they do some string kerning for you, but they do need to do some additional allocation so that you can get your string or own data structures. So that's not nice. I have a lot of problems with that. So of course, we have it in our data section, so we know that is all valid. We don't need to do any sort of validity checks on it. And we have already figured out what the memory layout should be, right? So while we are actually building the B-tree map, we have already figured out what the memory structure should be for it all to work properly. But we're basically getting rid of all of that information, and then when we start up or boot up our application, we redo all of those computations. So that's a lot of time wasted, and that's going to tank your startup times basically. Here's another wake-up call. Why can't we just dump our data structure directly into a file and then load it back? For example, Microsoft used to do this back in the day. They have this .doc format, right? Which is essentially a memory dump of their C data structures. That's what they did. They just dumped it down and then pulled it back, and that was it. Why can't we do that? Any takers?
When we have some size optimization of the binary, it will rename few stuff.
Pretty close. It will lead to some things being.
Basically, we cannot trust the user.
Right. No, actually now you cannot even trust the kernel, because what kernel does is when it loads your program into memory, it does some randomization of your addresses, right? So if you dump, once you have created your data structure, you dump it down to a file, you read it back, the pointers are all dangling because the addresses were completely randomized by the kernel. This is a security feature. It protects the your code from the entire system and the entire system from your code. It's a really nice security feature, but it really So what if we could completely skip the deserialization step? What if we can just serialize and then read back and start using it as is? Enter Archive. Archive is this really smart ass way of doing zero copy deserialization. What it does, it basically says, okay, once you have created your buffer, once you have serialized your data, you can read it directly back. You don't have to do any sort of parsing, you don't have to do any sort of allocations for this. So how they achieve that is actually a pretty cool thing, because Archive have already figured out how to be cross-platform compatible. This aligns with our goal of being WASM32 compatible. And also, it already supports like your basic standard data structures like B-tree-map, hash-map, vec, and even shaders like RCNR. So that's pretty amazing. They have been on this for a while. They are on 0.8 right now, and yeah, they work pretty hard on this. So how it works, again, this I might not have time to get through all of this, but essentially what it's doing is it's converting your normal pointers to relative pointers. So it creates a buffer, then it says, okay, this is where my root is. Then it says, okay, this particular field, say field A is 8 bytes into this particular buffer, right? So it knows, okay, where that particular data goes. This way you can dump it down and then read it back, and the references always remain the same. That's essentially what it's doing. The usage is quite simple. You just use the derived macro and everything is done for you. And if you don't trust your data, you can use PyCheck, or they provide you with a feature flag where it will also perform some additional checks, which is still faster than actually parsing and doing allocations. So that's pretty cool. So we just use archive. So we had our journey structure. We added our derived macro for archive and serialize. This is all we need. We don't really need to implement deserialization. Then you serialize your data, whatever we did previously, and then you can just include. And finally, this is the cool part. Because we know for sure that this data is coming from our binary itself, we can be entirely sure that this is a valid buffer, right? So we can use the unsafe API to just access it directly and check without any checks. So this really juices out the performance out of this. Now, a simple note on this is this construction does not obviously work out this nicely. You have to do some hacky stuff, and I cannot really get into that right now, so I will be releasing another blog post just to explain all of this. That will explain why we can't just do this build.rs and lib.rs thing, and how I actually went ahead and did it. Now, we have done all of our the bigger chunks of our work. We have figured out our pre-computation, we have figured out our embedding stuff. So we just put all of this together into a single kit, and I call it DMRC RS. That's the convention for us. This is already usable. You can use it on, you can just do cargo DMRC RS and you should be able to use it. I hope everyone will be making some really interesting projects. If you have any questions regarding the API and all that, I'm available almost anytime. For now, the API is really wonky because I just wanted the proof of concept to work. So I will be releasing some post maybe on our another post here. I have this all planned. So yes, so you can just load your journeys. This is going to be instant because it's coming from your binary. Then you can do fuzzy search. I implemented fuzzy search using the Nucleo grid. Nucleo is an implementation of FZF. Does anyone use FZF? Yes, so it's basically the same thing but faster. So Helix people implemented that. So you get your fuzzy searching, and you get your, you can grab your plans from it. And of course, if you want some really nice human time, you can add that. But this is going to be sort of like an SDK. This is the plan for this is to be sort of like an SDK for this. So for now, we just print it out. I don't really have a live demo in mind, but I do have an interactive example that you can just go to and, important part, I forgot about this. We want it to be Wasm32 compatible, and because archive just works across platforms, and because the archive is essentially for us, for ourselves, right? So you don't have to really worry about it. So we get our WebAssembly compatibility by default. We did not even have to do anything. And so you can build it with just target Wasm32 unknown, or you can use WASI P1 or P2, whichever you prefer, and you can run it. So in conclusion, again, there is no live demo, but you can go to my GitHub, you can check out some interactive examples. There are some interesting things to get you started. So we pre-computed everything. We got a really fast startup time for your binaries using zero-copy deserialization. We are compatible with Wasm. This is all we had in our mind. And the proof of concept works. But the API is a chaos right now because I just wanted it to work for now. And there are no tests right now. So that means it's not really open for contributions here. So I'll be really deep in my thoughts to get the API a bit stabilized, get some refactoring done, get a little bit of optimization done. If you are interested in optimization work, I will just create some issues that you can decide, okay, I want to work on this. So I will be opening up for contributions soon. So that's it. Any questions?
So how do you deal with the archive bit? How do you deal with the relative pointer to a relative pointer? Because
Archive has done that internally. So if you want to learn more about how does it.
it can have page faults, no? Matlab,
Yeah, that's
page
good.
fault
That's a
will be
really
there.
really good catch. So what they do is they have very strict policy with page alignments. So they have what they do is, let's say we took our journeys structure, right? They will derive special structures that are guaranteed to be page aligned, right? How they do it is using the recursive, right? Do you know about recursive
Yeah.
basic? Yeah, right. So you can just tell them, okay, this is the alignment I want. So they do all of this for you. So the derive macro is generating some structures that are going to be page aligned. And again, actually, in this example, yes, in this example, I'm just showing, okay, we're just including bytes, right? This does not work actually.
Yeah.
So this does not actually work because this is going to be one aligned. This needs to be 4 aligned. So you have to use the container called aligned. This literally called aligned. So you just wrap your bytes into aligned, and it will make sure that this is 4 aligned. This way you won't get the page faults.
So when you load it onto the memory, do you play it again? Like, do you replay all the relative paths?
You don't have to do that. So basically, when you do your actual access, do I have
Yeah,
access on
access.
this? Right. So when you're doing your actual access, that's when it's just pointer arithmetic. That's it. So it does not really need to do, okay, I need to go from here and then go from here and then go from here. It just, okay, if this particular piece of information has 104 bytes into the buffer. That's what it is. Anything else?
So, at the cost of serialization, the cost of serialization, we are using relative quantities.
Yes.
So, are we paying the runtime cost for?
So the archive has some benchmarks. They essentially say, okay, we are comparatively, almost comparable with the standard structures. Yeah.
The always have to be like single arithmetic operation for each.
Yeah. 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 Although I am not 100% sure on this, you'll have to get into the deep, right? You'll have to figure it out. But their benchmarks say, okay, we are comparable. Anything else? Yes.
So, as far as archive is concerned, I believe it's something like pickles in Python. It would be a similar concept that you have binary data.
I will get you.
Like, so you're storing it in like a binary format, right? Like the system
Yeah.
code, right?
Yeah.
So it's so the risk that I worry about with something like this, and as a business, if you're making an application or anything, you have to make these considerations. If tomorrow I want to send an update, will I
Okay,
need
so
to?
what's happening is
Yeah.
we are not writing to a file actually.
Yeah.
We are writing to our binary itself.
Yeah.
Right. So when you send an update, you will be sending a new binary, right?
Well, that worries me a bit more, with regards to scale, one, and with regards to, if someday a metro station is closed or whatever, will I need to rebuild everything? I can't force.
Yes, that's a really good concern. Yes, so you do have to rebuild everything. So
Yeah.
the plan for this is I'll be allowing 2 modes, right? So one is where everything will be pre-compiled, and the other mode will be it's going to be dynamic. That way, the Raptor algorithm actually handles delays, right? So you can connect with GDFS RT, which is GDFS real time, which gives you this information. You will obviously have to talk to DMRC people to get you actual updates, but the plan is to be able to do these real time things. So it's going to be your trade-off, right? You will have to figure out. There's additional trade-offs actually. I should mention this. This is not as simple as just doing, okay, how do I get from one place to the other? You also have to worry about what train is running on each route, right? That information is also stored in DMRC, and Raptor uses that information. So when we are building all of this, we are actually giving it a particular time. I have decided on like 6 a.m. that, okay, for 6 a.m. what is the best way of getting there? But for different times, it's gonna be different. So if you need to understand the trade-off to figure out okay, which mode you want to use. All of this will be in documentation so that you can decide. Another blog post, yes. Yes. Yeah, that's it. Right, thank you.
This was really good actually. We looked into data structure, we looked into algorithms, we looked into hacky stuffs we do. This idea started as like we were talking, let's do something with the Delhi Metro, and my idea was to do this inside an ESP maybe, like very small memory footprint.
So
Like even
this was an optional
computing.
target for me
Yeah.
as well. So he wanted me to put all of this into a
Yeah,
single
like can
memory.
you do this within like very small footprint, like maybe ESP32 or like STM, but he went other way and like let's.
Yes,
let's
I
do
have,
this.
so the pre-computed network right now takes 2.5 MB, which is higher than what he wants. He wants 1 MB, and I don't think I'll be doing that. But if
I
you
think there are
are-
ESPs with 8 megabyte footprints as well, so we can.
Nice.
go around.
I mean, at least it fits in L3, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
The
So
C3
if you
allows,
are interested in doing optimization for this space thing, right, you're welcome. Right? Just hit me up.
Yeah. We'll try to get inside of the ESP by the way. Alright, let's talk.